Hey everybody, welcome. Cindy Daychuck here with Queen Bee Creations. I'm coming at you with a new project and one that we're gonna play a little bit with a lot of decoupage. I don't do a lot of decoupaging, but I thought it would be kind of fun for a couple of reasons. One, like many of you, you've probably been going through your house and purging, doing some spring cleaning, even though you're not even at springtime. Just again, because you're home a lot more right now with the whole pandemic thing. So I picked up this cabinet. It's got, how many? 3, 6, 10, 12 drawers on it. And some cool hardware that quite honestly was a major pain in the neck. Because I put all the drawers in. Because all of these drawers are lined. They're all kind of this flocked fabric, which there is no way that I want to have to remove from 12 drawers. But it was over the hardware. I don't think that you can see. Okay, you can maybe see where I had to cut through that fabric to be able to take the hardware out because it's pronged. It's almost like it's a, I can't even think what it's called, but when it goes through into the piece, you have to open the prongs out, turn the ends down and hammer them down into the wood. So not sure what I'm gonna do when I put them back, if I can put them back. I may end up having to cut a little piece of cardstock and glue it over top if it looks particularly messy, but I'll worry about that later. So what we're going to be doing is decoupaging all the drawers. And what my thought was because as I was doing that purge thing, I discovered that when my youngest was first born was when scrapbooking was huge. It was really big. My older sister was into it, and so I kind of jumped in whole hog thinking I was going to do it. I think I did about 8 pages for him and then stopped, and I've had this big bin of all of the scrapbooking stuff since then, and he's 27 now. So I'm pretty certain I'm not going to be doing scrapbooking anytime soon, but I have tons of the paper. And I decided I need to use this stuff up. So this project was purchased with the idea of helping me be able to use up old craft supplies. So if you're like me and you've got abandoned crafts all over, which I do, maybe this is a great way to use it up. So here's the plan. I went through my stash and I came up with 6, because I've got 6 rows and I'm looking at each row being different. In my head, it's cute, so we'll see how that goes. So here's my 6 papers, and I think you can see it. So the first row will be this pale yellow, and it's got tiny little flowers, cream flowers. And then this striped row, then this darker kind of yellowy row, and finish off with the green. So then my dilemma was, what the heck color am I going to paint to offset this? White doesn't work because this isn't white. There's nothing white. I could have gone with just a slight off-white, a little bit cream, but that seems like it might be a little too stark. And I just wanted this to be kind of soft, lovely, kind of cute. So what I ended up doing was hand blending a color. And what I came up with, and again, using up bits and pieces of paint. Sometimes I end up purchasing paint colors that are for some custom finishes because that's what the client wants, not because it's a color that I typically use a lot. So what I came up with was this very pale green, which kind of picks up some of the color in this last one. It kind of offsets that. It's going to play off against like the green in the leaves there. So I think it will work. It's not going to have that stark white contrast. but it's kind of a bit of a greeny, sagey, khaki, pale avocado, I don't know what to call it. But it's often what I end up doing to use up colors. So what I used was a big honkin' whack of Annie Sloan Old Ochre. If you've seen some of the pieces that I've done recently, I did 2 different pieces, one with the Old Ochre contrasting against natural wood finish on a dresser, which I loved, and this old antique little tiny cabinet that I did completely in Old Ochre with a black and white winery transfer, and I did some aging with dark wax, really cool. That one sold, that's gone. But I had a whack of it. I had a client who had wanted sage, and it turned out I had 2 custom sage orders that I did at the same time, and I used a little bit of the, I think this is Antibes green, yeah, Antibes green from Annie Sloan. So I put, my formula, a whack of Old Ochre, 2 little dollops, maybe about 2 tablespoons of this, and then maybe about a tablespoon and a half of Fancy Farm Girl in DIY. These are all kind of chalk and clay-based paints. They're going to play nicely together, so you can mix them up. But that's what gave me the custom color that I was after. So the first step in this process is to paint up the piece. And I think that you guys have seen me paint before, so I'm not going to do that on camera. I'm going to come back at you once it's painted. I am going to paint the drawer fronts, even though I'm going to be covering them with the paper. I do want to distress a little bit around the edges, and as much as I'm okay if I distress down to the dark color, I also want to have maybe the light color reflecting back through the paper so that the colors on the pages stay a little bit more true. So I'm going to paint the whole thing twice before I come back to you, and then we'll start playing with some of the decoupage. In my head, it looks great. We'll see how it goes, because you're going to see if it looks awful either way. All right, as you can see, I've got a little bit ahead of where we were at last time. We painted the cabinet with our custom mix, 2 coats, and then we're moving on to the decoupage. So I've done a couple of the drawers already, but I wanted to show you the technique in doing this. We're using nothing fancier than good old Mod Podge, and I find that it works awesome, but there are lots of other decoupage mediums out there on the marketplace. Use the one of your choice. I know that this one works with the technique that I'm going to use. I'm assuming the others would too, but I'm making no guarantees because I haven't tried all the others. All that we're going to do is, over the 2 coats of paint, we are going to paint on our decoupage medium and making sure that we get out to the edges, because we definitely want the edges to adhere. And I'm not doing a super thick coat, but I'm also not doing an exceptionally light one. And I am kind of looking into the lights to be able to check for glare to make sure that I've got it everywhere. And I especially want the edges. Then I'm setting it aside to dry. Nothing fancier than that. And I have one little drawer over here already. We're working on this level. You can just see the bottom half of this drawer. But it is this design of paper. This coat is already on. It's already dry. But what we're going to do, I'm just doing this so I can make sure that you guys can see it, is just lining this up, because this is stripes. I just want it to at least be sort of straight. That makes sense. This is parchment paper, not wax paper, parchment paper, which means either side will work. And the only reason I have the parchment paper on there is to protect the surface of my paper, but also, especially if you've got thinner paper, this is fairly thick because it is a scrapbooking paper. but the thinner the paper, especially if you're doing this with napkins, the glue is gonna rise up through it a bit, and I don't wanna gum up my iron. And all we're gonna do is we are using the heat of the iron to reactivate that glue so that it's going to then stick to the backing of our paper. I like this method rather than just laying the paper down over the wet decoupage medium, over that wet glue, because I find that I get a nice smooth finish. I don't have the same ripples and bumps and things that sometimes you get with other papers and other glue mediums. The thinner the paper, the more prone you are to getting some bubbling happening. And I don't want to have that on the surface of this. So I like this technique just because it keeps everything kind of pressed down neat and tight and flat. And you will see that I'm going around the edges in particular and kind of leaning that iron down in so that I get it angled down onto those edges that it's going to adhere. Once this looks like it's down there nice and firm, I'm going to set it aside to cool. Well, as my luck, of course, would have it, I just discovered that, video cut out on you. So I just wanted to pop on to be able to kind of show what I ended up doing. We were here for the gluing of this, but in order to be able to cut the paper away, you could turn it upside down, take an X-Acto knife and cut along the edging of all the paper. But I find that really kind of picky to do, and especially to keep it to a nice straight edge. Easiest thing in the world to do is just take a sanding block and simply sand the edges against the paper. This one needed to just be smoothed out a little bit, but just sand it against the paper, and it actually just serves to tear your paper away, and there's no cutting required, all right? So it's just a nice, easy process. If you don't have a sanding block, you can just use sandpaper, something a little bit on the coarser side rather than super fine, because you don't want to be there all day. So the next step in our process is pretty basic. We are going to seal off our sanded paper, and we're also going to use the same sealer on our piece. Once it's all sealed, we'll probably do a little bit of aging. We'll see what that looks like, but it is as straightforward as using a sealer of your choice. Now, my preference when I am sealing over paper is not to use wax. Just I find that a top coat, an acrylic top coat, is going to be a little bit more durable. But I have seen other people wax it, so it really depends upon, I guess, your piece and where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used. Because I'm going to be reselling this and not knowing where ultimately the client is going to put it, I'd rather have it be a little bit more durable. So for that, I am using Big Top from DIY, obviously available on the website, queenbeecreationshome.com, or your local retailer. But we are simply going to be applying a coat of this, and you can see it brings back a little bit of the color from our sanded, but I'm going to be fairly smooth in applying it over our finish. Now, I will be applying a second coat on the drawer fronts. Again, just because they're that paper and I want to increase its durability, I just think that putting a second coat over top is going to help it. But because it's paper, I like to do a really light coat just to prevent bubbling again, on the off chance that it does. And I'd rather put more coats on than try and get away with one big coat. I think that you're going to find that you're going to be happier with the results if you go that way. So it is as simple as putting your top coat on and then we will look at doing a little bit more aging in the next step. Really what I wanted to do for this next step was to do a little bit of waxing. So again, I wanted to soften the look a little bit more. The distressing, the sanding off, soften some of the colors a little bit, but I'm looking at doing a little bit more, and for that I'm using two products. I'm using DIY white wax and DIY clear wax. Now this has already been sealed, so I'm mostly using the white wax. I've got the clear wax just in case I wanted to move the white wax or remove it a little bit more. And I'm going to start with this colored drawer just because I think that you're going to be able to see it better. But what I'm looking at is just wanting to kind of soften a little bit more. I'm thinking I may come in with a little bit of dark wax. All right, so you can see that that's just going to kind of sit on there, and I am going to let it firm up, but you can see the look of the two side by side. This is just a little bit softer looking than this one. We're going to let it firm, harden up, start to seal. And we can do some buffing, but I am actually going to do that, and then after go in with a little bit of dark wax. So that's going to be our next step. In the meantime, I'm going to be white waxing all of these drawers, right? Let's take a look at it on this color. So just putting this over and letting it kind of sit on there a little bit. Oh, I actually like it stippled, so I'm going to go back to this one rather than white. I like that kind of stippled look. Now, you could have just applied the wax directly onto the paper as your sealer, but as I said, I kind of like the idea of having a little bit more protection over the paper. I'm not sure who the ultimate buyer or user of this is going to be, and so I wanted it to be a little bit more durable, a little bit more protected than possibly with the wax. But I like that clouding look, that softening look versus the straight color, so I'm gonna go and do the entire dresser. I put the one piece of hardware on there just so that you could see what it's going to look like, obviously turning around, but we've got those for all of them, and two longer pieces down for these bigger drawers. My dog is fascinated with the wax. So I'm going to carry on with this, and then we'll come back and talk about whether or not the dark wax is going to be a happening thing or not.
In these clips, what you see is me taking a brush and applying the dark wax just to the corners and edges of the piece. I'm using a clean white rag, lint-free rag, to be able to blend out the colors a little bit. I think that what it does is just add a little bit more distinction, a little bit more aging to the piece. And I'm going to be doing this to the drawers and also to the green cabinet to the side as well.